It's winter. The year is 218 BC and you are standing on the muddy bank of an Italian river called the Trebbia. The cold cuts your skin like a knife. Mist rises from the dark water and envelops everything around. The horse's hooves, the soldier's spears, your own face. You take a deep breath and smell wet earth, sweaty leather, and distant smoke. On the other side of the river there is an army. More than 40,000 men arranged in perfect lines, shining shields, red standards fluttering in the icy wind. They are Romans, and they have come to put an end to everything. You are part of a different army, smaller, more tired, men who crossed the Alps on foot, who lost comrades to the cold, to the rocks, and to ambushes in the mountains. You survived all of that. And now, standing on this bank with the general in front of you mounted on his horse, you hear an order that seems impossible. Cross the river first. Your general's name is Hannibal Barca, and he has just set the most brilliant trap in ancient military history. But here is the question that no one asks. How did a man who arrived in Italy with a worn-out army, without reinforcements, without guaranteed supplies, and with winter at his back, manage to destroy a Roman army that was numerically superior, well-rested, well-fed, and in territory they knew by heart? The answer will change the way you think about strategy, patience, and the difference between what appears to be strength and what is, in truth, power. Go back a little further in time. Carthage, in North Africa, was the greatest commercial power in the Mediterranean. Rome was growing, expanding its tentacles throughout the Italian peninsula and beginning to see the sea as its next territory. The two civilizations were inevitably destined for conflict. The First Punic War had already left deep scars, especially on Carthage, which lost strategic islands and paid heavy tributes. Carthaginian pride was wounded. And within that wounded pride, a boy named Hannibal grew up. It is said that Hannibal was 9 years old when he asked his father, the general Hamilcar Barca, to go to war with him. His father hesitated. The boy insisted. So Hamilcar made Hannibal swear before the gods that he would never be a friend of Rome. The scene became known in history as Hannibal's Oath, and he kept every word of that oath throughout his life. At 26 years old, Hannibal commanded the Carthaginian armies in Hispania, the territory that is now Spain. He was a young general, but with a tactical intelligence that surpassed any commander of his time. He studied the enemy. He observed the terrain. He understood that war was not won by muscle alone. It was won with information, timing, and the ability to make the enemy act exactly as you want them to. In 218 BC, Rome declared war on Carthage. The Second Punic War had begun, and Rome expected the conflict to take place in Africa or Hispania. Far from home, far from their cities, far from their citizens, the Roman strategy was predictable. Send one army here, another there. Tighten the siege and win by wearing the enemy down. Hannibal did exactly the opposite. Instead of waiting for the Romans to come to him, Hannibal decided to go to Rome. Not by sea. The Roman fleet was superior, but by land, through the Pyrenees, the south of Gaul, and the Alps. When the Roman senators learned that Hannibal was crossing the Alps with an army of tens of thousands of soldiers and, in total disbelief, dozens of war elephants, many laughed. The Alps were considered impassable in winter. Hostile mountain peoples inhabited every pass. The cold killed more than any sword. Rome believed that nature would do the job for them. But Hannibal made it to the other side. He did reach the other side, yes, but at a devastating cost. Hannibal set out from Hispania with about 100,000 men. When he descended the slopes of the Alps onto Italian soil, he had just over 26,000 infantry and perhaps 6,000 cavalry left. The elephants, which had terrified the peoples who saw them for the first time, almost all died during the crossing. The cold, the altitude, the nighttime attacks by mountain tribes, and hunger took a brutal toll. The army that set foot in Italy was a shadow of the one that had departed. And it was right here that Rome made its first fatal mistake. They underestimated what remained, because what remained was enough. And in Hannibal's hands, it was more than enough. The first battle on Italian soil took place at the Ticino River in the north of the country. It was a swift cavalry clash, and the Romans retreated. A small Carthaginian victory, but with enormous significance. The Gallic tribes of northern Italy, who had hated Rome for generations, saw that Hannibal could win and began to join him. Suddenly, the worn-out army gained fresh blood, fierce warriors who knew the terrain and had old scores to settle with the Roman legionaries. Rome responded by sending a second army commanded by Consul Sempronius Longus. He was an ambitious, impatient man and had something that, in war, can be more dangerous than any enemy weapon: the need to prove something. Sempronius wanted a quick victory. He wanted to return to Rome as a hero before winter completely closed off the north. He wanted the credit for having defeated that African general who crossed the Alps as if it were a Sunday stroll. Hannibal knew all of this. He knew because he sent spies, because he spoke with the Gauls who moved between the two camps, because he observed the movements of the Roman patrols with the attention of someone assembling a puzzle, piece by piece, without haste. While Sempronius boiled with impatience, Hannibal cooled his mind and warmed up his plan. The plan began with a calculated provocation. Hannibal sent his Numidian cavalry, North African horsemen, the best riders of the ancient world, to attack the Roman camp at dawn. Not to win, to irritate, to wake the Roman soldiers in the cold, to make them rush to arms on empty stomachs, to make them feel they were losing the initiative. The Numidian cavalry attacked, retreated, attacked again, and disappeared into the mist. It was like being stung by a wasp you can never catch. Sempronius, furious, ordered an immediate counterattack. On a December morning, with the sun still below the horizon and the temperature near zero, the Roman soldiers were ordered to cross the Trebia River. No breakfast, no time to warm themselves by the fires, their clothes soaking through the moment they stepped into the icy water that reached up to their chests. On the other side, the Carthaginians waited, fed, warm, and rested. Hannibal had ordered his men to rub themselves with oil before the battle to protect their skin from the cold. A small detail, but a huge difference. But the cold and hunger were only part of the trap. The deadliest part was hidden. The night before, Hannibal had ordered his younger brother, Mago, to select 2,000 warriors, half on horseback, half on foot, and position them in a dry ditch covered with tall bushes, right on the riverbank, hidden in the dense vegetation that winter had left tangled and dark. 2,000 men, motionless in silence, lying in the mud, waiting, all through the night. Without making a sound, without lighting a fire, feeling the cold just as the Romans would feel it in the water. No Roman scout discovered this hiding place, either because they did not go far enough, or because the vegetation was too dense, or because Sempronius's arrogance led him to forego a more careful reconnaissance of the terrain. Whatever the reason, the result was the same. Rome was about to walk, eyes wide open, straight into a cage. When the Romans finished crossing the Trebia River, there were 40,000 men on the Carthaginian side. A huge, formidable force that, even soaked and shivering with cold, was still a war machine. The legions formed up, shields were raised, and spears pointed forward. It was a formation that Rome had perfected over generations. A heavy center, coordinated advance, constant pressure until the enemy gave way. Hannibal allowed the Carthaginian center to fall back slightly under Roman pressure, just enough to make the Romans feel they were winning, so that Sempronius would shout for his men to advance, to speed up, not to let the enemy catch their breath. The Carthaginian center bent like a reed in the wind, but did not break. Because what Sempronius did not see were the two wings of Hannibal's army closing in from the sides, like the arms of someone about to hug you far too tightly. The cavalry on the flanks, the Gallic warriors on the sides. And at the exact moment when the Romans were fully committed to the central advance, with their flanks already surrounded and no room to maneuver, Magon's 2,000 men emerged from hiding on the riverbank, attacking from behind. Imagine the scene. You are a Roman legionary. You are soaked to the bone. Your fingers can barely grip your shield. The cold has numbed your feet inside your wet sandals. You move forward because the man in front of you moves forward, and the man behind you pushes, and that's what Romans do. They advance together, like a human wall. For a moment, you believe you are winning. The enemy seems to be giving way. You shout along with the others. Your blood runs hotter in your veins, despite the winter. And then the world turns upside down. From the flanks, horsemen arrive. From the sides come warriors with painted faces, shouting in languages you don't understand. And from behind, coming out of nowhere, from a place your eyes had scanned and seen no one, 2,000 men arrive in a total fury. In seconds, the formation that was a wall turns into chaos. There is no longer a front, no longer a rear. There are only men trying to survive inside a circle that is closing in. This is what the Greeks called kaiklos, the total encirclement. And Hannibal had just executed the most devastating version the ancient world had seen up to that moment. The Battle of the Trebia lasted for hours. When it was over, more than 25,000 Roman soldiers were dead, drowned in the river, or captured. Only a core group of perhaps 10,000 legionaries managed to break a hole in the encirclement and flee toward the nearest city. Sempronius fled with them. He arrived in Rome and, as the story goes, claimed that the defeat had been the fault of the bad weather. The Romans of that time already understood very well the art of blaming the weather. But this is where the narrative needs to pause for a moment and take a deep breath. Because there is a very human temptation to look at Hannibal and see a hero from a cinematic epic, the solitary genius against the empire, the glorious underdog who humiliated the powerful, and in a way, he was all of that. But the reality of ancient warfare was made up of things that no documentary can fully show. The 25,000 Romans who died at the Trebia were men with names, with families, with fields to harvest and children to raise. Many were ordinary citizens who had been called up because Rome needed bodies to fill the legions. They died from the cold, drowned, crushed, without fully understanding what had happened to them. And Hannibal's soldiers also paid a price. The 2,000 men under Mago, lying in the freezing mud all night, suffered severe hypothermia. Several died in the following days. The remaining elephants, which were already few, did not survive the first Italian winter. Hannibal himself lost the sight in one eye during the next campaign due to an infection contracted in the marshes of Tuscany. The war was brutal for all sides, without exception. What makes Hannibal extraordinary is not the absence of suffering, but what he accomplished in spite of it. In the following years, he continued through Italy like a storm that Rome could not stop. At Lake Trasimene in 217 BC, he destroyed another Roman army by using the hills and the morning fog as invisible allies. At Cannae in 216, he executed a double envelopment so perfect that military scholars still study it today. More than 50,000 Romans killed in a single day, the greatest defeat in Rome's history. And even so, Rome did not surrender. This is the detail that changes everything, because here is the insight that the Battle of the Trebia carries within it, like a hidden gift. Hannibal was unbeatable in open field battles, but he couldn't take cities without siege equipment, and Rome was made up of walled cities. While Hannibal roamed Italy winning battles but failing to turn those victories into permanent territorial conquest, Rome rebuilt its armies, adapted its tactics, and learned, painfully, never to face Hannibal again on the terms he chose. A Roman general named Fabius Maximus became famous for refusing to engage Hannibal in battle. Instead, he pursued the Carthaginian army through the hills, cut off their supply lines, attacked smaller groups, and wore down the enemy's resources, never giving Hannibal the direct confrontation he needed to be decisive. The Romans called Fabius Cunctator, the delayer. A word that on the lips of impatient warriors sounded like an insult, but in reality described the smartest possible strategy against a tactical genius. Hannibal stayed in Italy for 15 years. 15 years. Without receiving enough reinforcements from Carthage, which was more concerned with its own internal politics than with the brilliant general who had crossed the Alps with elephants. 15 years winning battles, but unable to win the war. When he was finally called back to Africa to defend Carthage from a Roman attack led by Scipio Africanus, Hannibal lost his first major battle at Zama in 202 BC. Rome had learned, had adapted, had survived the impossible, and emerged on the other side, transformed. What the Battle of Trebia teaches us, more than 2,000 years later, is not just about war. It's about the difference between intelligence and brute force. Sempronius had more soldiers, more resources, and the territory in his favor. Hannibal had information, patience, and the rare ability to see the battlefield not as it was, but as it could be after a few calculated moves. While Sempronius reacted, Hannibal created the conditions for the enemy to react in the way he wanted. This works in war, it works in business, it works in any situation where two forces face off, and one of them insists on playing by the set of rules established by the other. The deepest lesson from Trebia is not about victory, but about adaptation. Rome lost tens of thousands of men, learning not to make the same mistake twice. And this ability to absorb the blow, reorganize their thinking and change strategy, was what transformed Rome into an empire that lasted for centuries. Not the fact that it never lost, but the fact that it never stopped learning from its defeats. Hannibal crossed the Alps with elephants and made it to the other side. Rome survived Hannibal and made it to the other side. History belongs to those who crossed the impossible and still managed to get up the next morning. If this dive into the mind of Hannibal Barca sparked something in you, leave your comment down below. Which part of his strategy impressed you the most? Like the video if you watched until the end, because that really helps the channel keep bringing stories like this one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit the button now. Every week there's a new story waiting for you. To keep exploring this world of battles and brilliant strategies, watch now the video about the Battle of Cannae, where Hannibal repeated the formula on an even larger scale. You won't be able to stop halfway through.